The Quiet Watcher. The night was cold and quiet outside the Hollywood set. Most of the crew had already packed up their gear, their laughter fading as cars drove away. Under a flickering streetlight, one man remained, leaning against an old black motorcycle. His dark jacket carried the chill of the evening, and his eyes stayed fixed on the studio gate. It was Keanu Reeves, silent, thoughtful, and waiting. He wasn't there for fame, not for attention, and not for any scene to shoot. He was waiting for Sandra Bullock. She had been working late again, pushing herself past exhaustion. The film they were shooting together had drained her in ways no one could see. The world saw her as strong and confident. But Keanu noticed the tired eyes that smiled anyway, the way she gave warmth to everyone but forgot to keep some for herself. So he waited, quietly, every night for a week, not to talk, not to interfere, just to make sure she got home safe. But tonight felt different. There was something in the air, a tension, a feeling that something unexpected was about to happen. The studio gate opened slowly, and Sandra walked out carrying her heavy coat and a script folder pressed to her chest. Her steps were slow, her shoulders low. She didn't see him at first. She was lost in her own thoughts, about the scene that went wrong, about the people she couldn't please, about the exhaustion she hid behind her gentle laugh. Keanu stepped forward quietly. His voice was low. "Long day?" She turned, startled for a second, then softened when she saw him. "Keanu, what are you doing here? You should be home." "It's late." He smiled slightly. "Just making sure you get home safe." She laughed, a tired sound. "You don't have to do that." "I'm fine," he shrugged. "I know. But maybe you shouldn't always have to be fine alone." Her eyes lingered on his for a moment, and calm, steady, kind. No one had said that to her in years. She tried to hide her emotion with a smile. "You're too kind for your own good." "Maybe," he said. "But kindness still matters." They walked together to her car. The streetlight hummed softly. There was no rush, no cameras, no words that needed to impress. Just two people who understood silence better than most. When she drove off, Keanu waited until the taillights disappeared, then got on his motorcycle and followed from a distance. Not too close, just enough to make sure she reached home safely. He had no idea she would one day find out what he was doing, and that discovery would change both their lives. That night, Sandra reached home and looked into her mirror. For the first time in weeks, she smiled honestly. She didn't know why. Maybe it was because someone cared quietly, but what Keanu didn't know was that a shadow had been following him too. Someone with a camera, hidden across the street. By morning, a few blurry photos of Keanu Reeves waiting alone outside Sandra Bullock's set began to spread online. Rumors started instantly. Hollywood romance, secret affair, strange obsession. By the time Keanu woke up, the internet was on fire. But the truth was far simpler and far deeper, and soon the whole world would see what real kindness looked like. The whisper behind the rumor the next morning came with noise. Not the peaceful hum of sunrise, but the sharp sound of phones buzzing, reporters calling, and online whispers turning into storms. Keanu Reeves sat by his kitchen window, a cup of black coffee untouched in his hand. He wasn't used to mornings like this. His life was built on calm routines, quiet rides, and simple acts no one noticed. But now the world had decided to notice. His phone blinked endlessly. Messages from his agent, the studio, even his sister. Every headline said the same thing. Keanu Reeves secretly waiting outside Sandra Bullock's set. Late-night romance? He sighed softly. There was no anger in him, just disappointment. He never wanted attention for kindness. He just wanted to make sure a friend got home safe. He picked up his phone and sent a short message. "Hey, Sandra. Sorry if this created trouble for you. I didn't mean to cause a scene." A few minutes later, her reply appeared. "Keanu, don't apologize. I know your heart. People will talk, they always do. We'll handle this together." Her calm words steadied him, but outside their small world, the storm was only growing. Reporters began waiting outside the studio. Questions flew through microphones like arrows. "Are you two dating? Why were you waiting outside alone? Is this a secret love story?" Sandra handled it with grace, smiling softly and saying, "Keanu is one of the kindest people I know. That's all there is." But even her words didn't stop the gossip. The internet didn't care for truth. It cared for noise. By evening, Keanu decided to face it differently. Instead of hiding, he arrived at the studio quietly, helmet in hand. The cameras flashed as soon as they saw him, voices overlapping in chaos. "Keanu, is this true love?" someone shouted. He smiled faintly, replying with his calm voice. "It's just kindness. That's all." Those 4 words became a mystery across social media. What did he mean by just kindness? Some mocked it. Others admired it. Memes and debates filled timelines. But deep inside, Sandra understood what he really meant. He was reminding the world that not every act needs to be romantic to be meaningful. That night, after filming ended, she found him waiting again. Not near her car this time, but by the corner cafe they used to visit years ago during their first movie together. She sat across from him, her hair tied back, exhaustion softening her face. "You're brave to show up," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time people see what kindness really looks like," he replied. Sandra smiled. "You think they'll believe you?" "No," he said simply, "but maybe someone who's lonely tonight will. Maybe someone will learn that care doesn't always mean romance. Sometimes it's just wanting someone to be safe." His words settled like soft rain between them. For a moment, silence wrapped around them again, the same silence they had shared years ago on movie sets. Comfortable, kind, unspoken, but before they could leave, the cafe door opened and a woman stepped inside holding a small envelope. Her face was tired, her eyes filled with hesitation. She approached their table and said, "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I think this belongs to you." She handed Keanu the envelope and walked away quickly. Inside was a folded piece of paper with shaky handwriting that read, "You saved more than her that night. Thank you." Beneath the note was a photograph, the same street where he had waited, but from a different angle. In the picture, a little girl could be seen behind a nearby fence, holding her mother's hand. The woman in the cafe was that same mother. Sandra looked at him, confused. "What does this mean?" Keanu's voice softened. "Maybe someone else saw what kindness does. Neither of them knew it yet, but that letter was only the beginning of something much larger. Something that would uncover hidden truths, long-forgotten promises, and a story the world would never forget. The stranger's letter. The rain kept falling softly over the city, washing the streets clean, but leaving behind the quiet echo of secrets. Keanu placed the small envelope carefully on his table. The handwriting kept replaying in his mind. "You saved more than her that night. Thank you." For the first time in a long while, he felt something deeper than confusion. It was a mix of warmth and worry. He wanted to understand. Who was that woman? What did she mean by "you saved more than her"? The next morning, he decided to visit the studio early. Sandra was already there, dressed in a simple gray coat, reading her script. She looked up when she saw him. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "The letter kept me awake." She smiled a little. "I knew it would. You never stop thinking when someone says thank you?" He laughed softly. "Maybe because I'm still trying to believe I deserve it." They sat in quiet understanding before Sandra leaned forward. "Let's find her. Maybe she needs help." Keanu nodded. "That's what I was thinking." Later that day, they returned to the cafe where the woman had appeared. The waiter recognized them instantly but didn't seem surprised. "You're looking for the lady from last night?" he asked quietly. Keanu nodded. The waiter lowered his voice. "She comes here often. She works across the street at the community shelter." They walked out and crossed the wet road, entering the small building marked Haven Center. It smelled of old paper, rain, and hope. Inside, a few volunteers were packing meals for families. Then they saw her, the same woman from the cafe, helping a child tie his shoes. Her name tag read, Elena. When she noticed them, her eyes widened slightly, but she smiled kindly. "I was hoping you'd come," Keanu spoke softly. "Your letter. What did it mean?" Elena took a deep breath and pointed to the picture she had included. "That night when you waited outside the studio, my daughter and I were walking home from the bus stop. A man had been following us for days. I was scared. But when he saw you standing there waiting by your motorcycle, he turned around and disappeared. I don't think you even noticed us, but your presence. It made him leave. The air grew still. Sandra's eyes glistened. Keanu's hands tightened slightly, not out of pride, but out of quiet shock. He had no idea, Elena continued. I tried to thank you then, but you were gone before I could. When I saw your picture in the news, I realized you were just being kind, and the world twisted it into gossip. I wanted to tell you the truth. That night, you didn't just protect your friend. You saved a mother and her little girl, too. Sandra touched Keanu's arm softly. His eyes lowered, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't do anything special. I was just standing there, Elena smiled. Sometimes standing there is enough. Sometimes kindness isn't about action. It's about presence. The moment hung heavy between them, a quiet truth that neither fame nor rumors could distort. As they were about to leave, Elena said, There's something else. The man who followed us. He was a former crew worker. He lost his job here a few months ago. He's been staying around this area and he's not well. Maybe he needs help too. Sandra's brow furrowed. You mean he's still out there? Elena nodded. He's lost. Angry but not evil. Maybe just forgotten. Keanu's face turned thoughtful. Then maybe we shouldn't forget him. That night, Keanu and Sandra returned to the same street where everything began. The set was quiet now, the lights dimmed, and the wind carried the faint smell of rain. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Sometimes silence speaks when words fail. Across the street, a figure sat on the curb, tired, soaked, and trembling. It was the same man Elena had described. His hands clutched a torn backpack. Keanu approached slowly. Hey, he said gently, are you all right? The man looked up, startled. His eyes were red from sleeplessness. Do I look all right? He muttered bitterly. Keanu didn't flinch. He sat beside him, leaving a respectful distance. No, you don't, but maybe you could be. The man frowned. You don't know me. Maybe not, Keanu said. But I know what pain looks like when it tries to hide behind anger. The man's face softened. Rain fell harder now, but neither of them moved. Sandra watched quietly from a few steps away, her eyes filled with quiet respect. After a long silence, the man finally whispered, I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just didn't want to disappear. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to. People still care. You just need a place to start again. Those words, simple as they were, broke something inside the man, not in a painful way, but in a healing one. Later, when Sandra and Keanu returned to their cars, she said quietly, You waited for me that night because you cared. But now I see it was bigger than that. It's like kindness finds its way where it's needed most. Keanu smiled faintly. Maybe kindness has its own map. Sandra looked at him for a long time before whispering, And maybe you're its compass. He didn't answer, just looked up at the cloudy sky as the rain slowed. He had no idea that in the coming days, that single night of waiting would lead to something far greater, a chain of kindness spreading quietly across people's lives, connecting stories that had never meant to meet. The chain of unseen kindness. The rain stopped the next morning, leaving behind streets that shimmered under a soft golden sunrise. It felt like the city itself had taken a deep breath after a long night. Keanu Reeves sat by his motorcycle outside the community shelter, watching as volunteers came and went. It had been a week since that night, the night that changed everything. The rumor that had once spread like wildfire had started to fade. People were no longer talking about scandal or gossip. Instead, they were sharing stories of small acts of kindness that had gone unnoticed for years. It began when Elena, the woman from the cafe, posted her story online. She didn't use Keanu's name at first. She simply wrote, A man once waited outside a studio, not knowing his silence saved a mother and her child. Sometimes kindness doesn't need a name. Within hours, the post spread quietly but deeply. Thousands shared their own memories. Strangers who had been helped by others in silent, unexpected ways. A student wrote about a bus driver who gave him free rides until he could afford a ticket. A nurse shared how an anonymous man paid for a child's surgery. The internet, for once, was full of gratitude instead of anger, and all of it had started with one man waiting quietly outside a gate. Meanwhile, Sandra Bullock was finishing her last few scenes on the film. Everyone on set noticed she seemed lighter, calmer. Even the director joked, "Whatever peace you found, share it with the rest of us." But her peace came not from fame or success. It came from the reminder that kindness was still alive, even in a world that often forgot it. After wrapping up, she walked over to Keanu, who was sitting on a low wall near the parking lot, feeding a stray dog half of his sandwich. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" she said with a smile. He grinned softly. "Maybe he needed lunch more than I did." She sat beside him. "You've started something, you know?" Elena's story, the messages, it's everywhere. People are calling it the quiet kindness chain. Keanu shook his head gently. "I didn't start anything. People just needed a reason to remember what they already had inside them." She looked at him for a long time before saying, "You know what's strange? You never try to defend yourself against the rumors, the jokes, the lies. You just stay calm. How do you do that?" He paused, thinking carefully. "Because the truth doesn't need to shout. It just waits, quietly, until people are ready to hear it." Her eyes softened. "And when they finally do, it changes them." Later that evening, Elena called. Her voice trembled slightly. "Keanu, I wanted to tell you. The man we met that night, he came by the shelter. He's been volunteering here for 3 days straight. He said you told him people still care?" Keanu smiled quietly. "That's good. Everyone deserves a second chance." Elena added, "He said he wants to apologize to you and to Sandra. He's been writing something." Keanu replied gently, "Tell him he doesn't owe me words, just kindness to someone else. That's enough." The next few days passed like calm waves. Sandra started a small outreach project with Elena to fund meals for single parents at the shelter. Keanu visited quietly, never letting cameras follow. He helped fix broken tables, clean storage rooms, and carry boxes of supplies. The staff treated him like one of their own. Not a star, but a volunteer who listened more than he spoke. One evening, while stacking boxes in the storeroom, he found a small cardboard sign pinned near the wall. Written in simple black marker were the words, "You don't have to be famous to be kind." It stopped him for a moment. He smiled, reading it twice. Sandra appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah. Just thinking how strange it is. I've spent years trying to build roles that inspire people, but maybe the real story happens when no one's filming." She smiled softly. The best stories never need cameras. Days turned into weeks. News outlets that once chased rumors began reporting something new. A rise in anonymous donations, shelters receiving surprise support, people helping neighbors in small but powerful ways. The headlines read, "The quiet kindness movement spreads worldwide." Interviews flooded in, but Keanu refused them all. He stayed silent, preferring to let others speak. When one reporter finally caught him outside a charity event, she asked, "Mr. Reeves, people say you inspired all of this. Is it true?" He looked at her calmly and replied, "I didn't inspire anything. Kindness did. I just happened to be standing close enough to see it." His words trended everywhere, yet he didn't care for the numbers. What mattered to him was what happened quietly behind the noise. The letters arriving at shelters, the smiles of people helping strangers, the feeling that for once, the world had remembered what humanity felt like. One night, Sandra and Keanu visited Elena and her daughter. They sat under the same streetlight where everything had begun. Elena's daughter ran around laughing, holding a small lantern Keanu had brought her. "You know," Sandra said softly, "it's funny. You waited that night because you were worried I might not get home safe. And now, somehow, that moment helped hundreds of people feel safe again." Keanu looked at the glowing lantern in the little girl's hands. "Sometimes kindness travels farther than we ever see. It's like light. It doesn't stop when we walk away." Elena smiled. "And maybe that's why it never dies." The night breeze carried their laughter down the street. There was no fame, no flashing lights, no cameras, just 3 people, a child's laughter, and the quiet echo of something pure. But deep inside, Sandra could sense that the story wasn't over yet. There was still one last twist waiting in the shadows, one truth that neither of them knew, and when it came, it would test their hearts more than any rumor ever could. The truth behind the flash. The click of that camera was quiet, almost lost in the hum of the night. But sometimes, the smallest sound carries the biggest storm. A few days later, the internet was awake again, flashing images, half-truths, and questions everywhere. Someone had uploaded a photo of Keanu, Sandra, and Elena sitting under the streetlight, laughing with the little girl. The caption read, "Hollywood's secret kindness cult caught on camera." The post spread fast. What had begun as warmth and compassion was now twisted into suspicion. Comments filled with mockery and doubt. They're just doing this for attention. It's all publicity. No one helps strangers like that anymore. Keanu saw the chaos unfold quietly on his phone, sitting in his dim apartment. He wasn't angry and just sad. Not for himself, but for what the world had turned kindness into. His phone rang. It was Sandra. Her voice was calm, but he could hear the weight behind it. "Keanu, don't read the comments. It'll only hurt," he sighed softly. "It doesn't hurt me, Sandra. It hurts the idea that people can't believe in something good without doubting it." She paused. "Maybe that's why we need to keep going. To show them it's real." The next day, both arrived at the shelter again. Reporters had already gathered outside, hoping to catch a dramatic headline. Microphones pointed at them like arrows. "Is this a publicity stunt? Are you two starting a movement for fame? Who's funding this project?" Keanu didn't speak. He looked around and saw volunteers trying to carry boxes past the crowd, their path blocked by cameras. Quietly, he walked forward, lifted 2 boxes himself, and carried them inside. He didn't answer a single question. The silence became the answer. Inside, Sandra helped Elena calm the frightened children who had seen the crowd outside. One small boy tugged her sleeve and asked, "Are you in trouble?" She smiled gently. "No, sweetheart." Sometimes when people don't understand kindness, they try to turn it into a story. But kindness isn't a story. It's a heartbeat. Keanu overheard her words and smiled faintly. Later that night, as the crowd dispersed, an unexpected visitor arrived, the same man who once followed Elena home. He looked cleaner now, calmer, and he carried a sealed envelope. "I didn't mean for this to get so big," he said quietly, "but there's something you both need to see." He handed the envelope to Keanu, then walked away before either could speak. Inside was a short letter, written in careful handwriting. The person who took that picture wasn't a reporter. It was me. I didn't mean harm. I just wanted the world to see the truth. But someone stole my phone before I could post it with the real story. There was also a memory card inside. Keanu and Sandra looked at each other. "Should we see what's on it?" Sandra asked softly. Keanu nodded. Truth doesn't fear light. They plugged it into a computer at the shelter office. The screen flickered, and a video appeared. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a trap. It was footage of that same night. Keanu helping a homeless man fix his cart, Sandra laughing with Elena's daughter, the small group sharing food under the streetlight. The sound of their laughter was real, pure, untouched, but the most powerful moment came at the end of the video. A shaky voice belonging to the man who filmed it said, "People think Hollywood has lost its soul, but I saw 2 people remind me that kindness still breathes. This isn't about fame. This is about being human." When the video ended, silence filled the room. Elena wiped her tears. Sandra whispered, "The world needs to see this," but Keanu hesitated. "If we post it, they'll just twist it again." "Maybe," she said, "but maybe someone out there will finally believe." 2 days later, the shelter uploaded the video anonymously, without their names. It was titled "The Night Kindness Waited." Within hours, millions watched. People cried. People shared. Comments flooded in, not of hate, but of hope. "I thought kindness was gone. Thank you for reminding us that good still exists. Maybe we all need to start, waiting for someone to." The movement that had started as misunderstanding became something beautiful again. Schools began teaching kindness projects. Celebrities pledged donations quietly. News outlets praised the Quiet Kindness campaign, never realizing it began with one man waiting under a streetlight. A week later, Sandra visited Keanu's apartment. She brought 2 cups of coffee, just like old times. They sat by the window, watching the city lights. She smiled softly. "It's strange. You never said a word to defend yourself, and yet the truth spoke louder than anything we could have said." Keanu took a sip of his coffee. "Because truth doesn't shout, it whispers. But the right hearts always hear it." She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. "You know, you could have just gone home that night." "You didn't have to wait," he smiled faintly. "I think I did. Something in me said someone might need me. I just didn't know how many." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was gentle, like peace after a long storm. Outside, the city glowed under golden streetlights. Somewhere across town, a stranger stopped his car to help a woman change a flat tire. In another part of the city, a young actor left sandwiches for the homeless outside a studio gate. The chain continued, one act at a time. And though few knew where it began, its roots traced back to one night, one quiet heart and one choice to wait. The night the world finally understood. The weeks that followed felt different, lighter, quieter, almost sacred. The storm that once tried to twist a simple act into noise had finally calmed. And in its silence, something rare began to bloom: understanding. People no longer looked at Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock as movie stars wrapped in rumors. They saw them as human beings who reminded the world of something it had forgotten: the power of small, quiet kindness. But for Keanu, the journey wasn't over. There was still one thing left unsaid, something that weighed softly on his heart. One evening, he returned to the same street where it all began: the studio gate, the flickering lamp, the place where he had once stood alone just to make sure Sandra got home safe. The air was cool, the light golden, the city alive yet peaceful. Sandra arrived a few minutes later, walking slowly toward him with a gentle smile. She still remembered that night vividly, the exhaustion, the loneliness, and the strange comfort of seeing him waiting. "You came back here again," she said softly. He nodded. "I wanted to see where everything started, where one small choice changed everything." She looked around, her eyes soft with memory. "It doesn't look the same anymore." "It shouldn't," he replied quietly. "Because we're not the same anymore." For a moment, they both stood in silence, listening to the sound of a train far in the distance. After a while, Sandra said, "I've been thinking about something." "About all this? The stories, the movement, the people helping each other. Maybe we should give it a name." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "A name? Something simple," she continued. "Something people can remember when they forget that kindness still exists." He thought for a long moment, then smiled. "How about wait for someone?" She looked at him, her eyes glimmering. "Wait for someone?" "Yeah," he said softly. "Because that's where it began. Sometimes the greatest kindness isn't giving or fixing. It's waiting. Waiting when the world rushes past. Waiting when someone feels alone. Waiting because care doesn't always need words." Her eyes filled with quiet emotion. "That's beautiful, Keanu." They decided to turn the phrase into a small initiative. No sponsors, no money, no fame. Just a message. On a plain website, a single sentence appeared: "Wait for someone today, not because they need it, but because you can." Below it, there was no mention of Keanu or Sandra. Only stories, shared by ordinary people from every corner of the world. Woman from Brazil wrote about waiting with an old man until his bus arrived. A teenager in Japan shared how he stayed after school to walk a lonely classmate home. A doctor in India wrote that he now waits outside the hospital every night to make sure his nurses get taxis safely. The stories poured in endlessly. Months passed. The wait for someone message became a quiet global wave, not viral in the noisy sense, but deeply human, spreading through whispers, classrooms, dinner tables, and street corners. It wasn't about fame or charity. It was about slowing down long enough to care. One night, during an interview at a humanitarian event, A journalist finally asked Keanu a question that stopped the room. "Mr. Reeves, if you could tell the world one thing after all this, what would it be?" He smiled gently. "That kindness doesn't need an audience. It just needs a moment. I didn't save anyone. I just didn't leave." There was silence, and then soft applause. Not the kind born of entertainment, but the kind born of respect. Sandra, sitting in the front row, felt her eyes sting with quiet pride. After the event, as the night deepened, they both sat outside under the soft glow of streetlights, the same light that had once witnessed their first quiet encounter. Sandra looked up at the sky and said, "Do you ever wonder how far a single act really goes?" Keanu thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe kindness is like light. You don't always see where it ends, but it keeps traveling, forever." She smiled. "And you started it, you know." He shook his head. "No, kindness started long before me. I just listened when it called." She leaned back, looking at him with warmth. "You waited that night because you cared, and that one night made the world remember how to care again." He smiled softly, eyes glimmering with quiet peace. If that's true, then it was worth every rumor, every misunderstanding, every silence. As they sat together, the city seemed to slow around them. The wind carried the sound of laughter, distant but real. A mother walking home with her child, a stranger holding the door open, someone helping another cross the road. It was all connected, invisible threads of kindness weaving quietly through the world. And somewhere in the shadows, the old streetlight flickered again, just as it had that very first night. Later, when they finally stood up to leave, Sandra turned to him and said, "You'll still wait for people, won't you?" He smiled faintly, always. "Even when no one sees it." She nodded, her voice low but full of warmth. "Then maybe that's why the world still believes in you, Keanu. Because you remind it that real strength doesn't need to shout." They shared a quiet smile, then walked away under the same light that once began it all. Behind them, the street grew silent again, but this time it wasn't loneliness. It was peace, because now, in countless corners of the world, someone, somewhere, was waiting for someone else, just because they could, and that was enough.